part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi everyone, this is your host, Don Mike Mendoza for Producing While Asian. Today's conversation is with Stephen Cuevas, a Filipino-American music director who's not only music directed on Broadway, but all around the country. And he's here today to talk about his favorite experiences, his challenges, and kind of what he's gone through to get to where he is today, as well as some advice for anybody aspiring to be like him. So I hope you enjoy today's conversation, and welcome again to Producing While Asian. Thank you, Stephen, for joining me on Producing While Asian. It's so good to see you after seeing you in Vegas this year. How are you? How's everything?
I'm good. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I'm good. I'm here in New York City. And yeah, it seems like we're going back to the grind and everything's opening back up here. So I'm starting to get used to the hustle again.
Yeah, it's really nice to see all of our friends working again and to see everybody back in the swing of things. But I agree with you. It's overwhelming. Like I've been kind of on a lesser schedule for so long that I have this like unintended new form of anxiety when things get scheduled, because it's just like getting back into that. So I don't know if you're feeling similar.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not even just that. It's the doing of it. It's more tiring physically than we remember because we haven't done it for almost 2 years. So I think we're all just tired, but it's a good tired.
I described it to someone as like getting back into dance class, like after not dancing for so long, and then it's there. It feels right. Yeah. You know what should come next, but you just have to do it to get back into it. And so you're going to be a little weird for the first 8 counts, but otherwise, it comes back. So on the show, the point of my having you as a guest and all of my guests is to get to know you and to show the audience that there are amazingly talented AAPI people out in the world that are doing great things. So for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about your story and how, like the Cliff Notes version, how you got to where you are today as a music director.
Right. Well, I started playing piano when I was 3. I don't even remember back then, but that's what I've been told. And I grew up watching all those old movie musicals and the Disney Renaissance movies and even the older ones. So I think I was destined to kind of be in musical theater. I had it in my blood since I was a young kid. I didn't really know I could do it as a career until I got into college, and then even beyond that. So I studied to be a musical theater performer in college, and not too long after I graduated, I turned a little to the left and went down the music director path. So yeah, that's how I kind of got started. I did musicals and plays all throughout school in my younger years, so that's what led me to want to pursue it in college.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I feel like, a little bit of that is being Filipino, right? I feel like we're born into the seat of a piano, regardless of if you end up playing or not. Tell us a little bit about the switch. So you were going through the performer path, which is something I did too. And because I feel like that's the kind of entry point, right? So talk a bit about where did that switch happen for you? Kind of where it kind of dawned on you, like, oh, okay, well, I love performing, but I definitely want to be on the music side a little more.
Right. So I'm one of those Filipinos that actually stuck with piano. So all throughout, high school and even into college, whenever I wasn't on stage, I would be playing the piano for the dance rehearsals, or someone would ask me to play a song for them and accompany them here and there. So I kind of always did that throughout my teenage years and into my college years. And then my first job out of college was at a summer stock theater. And they were doing a season that had King and I and M Butterfly. So I knew that they were interested in me. But they were looking for an actor music director track. Actually, I would be in all of the main stage shows and also music direct the children's show that summer. When I was in callbacks, I told them that I was interested in that track, and I was eventually hired for that. At the end of that summer, the producer came up to me and said, Steven, we're going to hire you back next summer, but we're going to make you the main stage music director. So that's kind of how it happened. Wow. Yeah. So when I say it happened very quickly out of college, it really did.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's funny how in the before times, what defined a track for a performer, where it's like, yeah, we want you to, well, also summer sock, but like, we want you to be in the main stage shows, but also music direct all the other shows. Like, that's cool, right? So I hope we're getting to a place of, having people do that, but also like understanding the limits of, what they put on someone. But that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like, so after that, what happened for you next? Kind of what project? So you came back there, but then what else was happening around you in that moment?
I came back to New York. I'm originally from New York, Queens and Long Island. So I went back home like everyone does out of college if you don't move to one of the bigger cities. So I just happened to live near one of the big cities and the one that everyone wants to go to when they're pursuing theater. So I started doing, one-off jobs and, any side job that had music involved in it. And that's how I kind of got started. I like to say I didn't have any survival job that didn't have music in it. So I was kind of lucky that way. And I just started meeting people throughout all of those jobs. And in my field, that's kind of how you get connected with everyone in the business. You just do gigs, you say yes to everything. You say yes to things that you don't even have the skill to do, but you figure it out once they hire you. So that's what I did. For example, one of my jobs after all of those summer stock gigs was the national tour of Spring Awakening. When I saw that they were looking for a viola player, I played violin growing up, so I thought I'd submit for it. And I actually got the job, not ever having touched a viola. And so after I got hired,
Surprise.
I said, well, I need to get a viola. I need to figure out how to play it. I need to figure out how to read the clef, which was all different. But yeah, and so that job and saying yes to something I didn't actually do led to my first touring experience.
That's awesome. And you are one of the first, I think you might be the first music director that I'm talking to this season. And this is the first season of Producing Violation, so hooray. So it's nice to get the perspective from the music side. And the other thing too, it's like some people, not necessarily in theater, but there are a lot of people that don't realize how essential the music side of musical theater is. And so I feel like, if you have that skill, it's awesome, because like you're gonna be hired a lot because you're in demand, because the shows don't exist without your skill. So you're very important, so which is really great. But it's so cool to hear that not only in the piano world were you getting hired, it's also in other instruments as well. Do you feel that, and I ask this because like as a musical theater, someone who started as a musical theater actor, I was very poor at music theory. And so I was not the Filipino that studied piano. And but I could keep a tune. When you switch instruments, are the skills easily translatable between instruments, or did you find it to be like a bigger challenge to switch from violin to viola, or kind of getting into that, like when you jump around between instruments for different jobs, how much of a challenge is that for you, or not?
I like to think of it in terms of what is needed of me. For example, I knew when I took that Spring Awakening job on viola, there was a set of music I needed to learn and learn well. There was a type of tone that I needed to perform the songs. I was in the middle of a string trio. I knew the music beforehand. So it's kind of like I knew what was going to be asked of me. So I went into it that way. And I do that with a lot of types of jobs. Like, what is the music direction? What is the direction of the music direction in this show? What do the composers and the creative team need from me? So I tend to approach things that way. What is needed of me as the music director, as the musician in the pit? And then I approach it that way. It then becomes less overwhelming that I don't have to learn every single skill on this instrument or every style of music. It's always kind of prescribed before I head into a gig.
It's awesome. So touch a little bit, you did already, but maybe go a little bit more into your process. So maybe it's like a twofold question. So when you first got signed on to be a music director full time, and had now you were facing not just your own instrument but now everybody's instruments, about that experience, and then how your process going into a new gig has evolved since that first time to now, because what you're doing now is way beyond that first experience, right? So kind of how has that changed over the years?
Mm-hmm. It all depends on the gig, the show, the concert I'm doing. But I think a general sense of what I do is I take a look at the general scope of the show, what style the show is, what genre of music, who are involved, the singers, the actors, the directors, choreographers, all that kind of stuff, the composers if they're involved, orchestrators, all the different people who go into making a show. And I see where I fit in that. I obviously get the music, the score, the script, and do a little research beforehand so that day one, when I'm expected to teach an entire score, I know what I'm doing. But right. It's funny how like all that prep work will prepare you for day one, but then you get in the room with all the other artists, and then a lot of your perspectives or ideas kind of shift because of the collaborative nature of theater. So something I might not think of may just pop into my head at any given moment because I'm inspired by a dance rehearsal or something that is said when the director talks about this moment in the show. Mm-hmm. Or maybe vice versa. And the choreographer will take a listen to music rehearsal and they see that the cutoff is on 4 on this note. So they will choreograph something on beat 4 to mimic the cutoff in the vocals. So it does become a collaborative process, and it's kind of magical in that way, how what I do evolves day to day.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about what we do is like the magic of not just the collaboration, but also just it's different every day. It's not just like here's step 1 to step 10 and then we do the show and that's it. Like every experience is different. Even if you're doing the same show multiple times, it's never the same, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with working with actors, you think you have an idea about a character and then the actor sings a song in a certain way, and your ideas and your perspective changes about what the song means. Then every actor, as you said, not everyone comes from a music theory based learning. So right. I actually am okay with that, and I work with people from where they come from, and if I can get an into their process and if we can find a connection and a way to collaborate, even if you didn't take AP theory in high school, then that's right. Great. But that's also my job to kind of bridge that gap and to help the actors either understand or see their perspectives and see how I can translate that musically.
For sure.
For the Dennis Maniloff Show, I'll tap into my 40-plus years of following Cleveland sports and 30-plus years of writing and talking about them, so as to bring you informed opinions and analysis of your favorite players and teams. I also will monitor the national sports scene and, when warranted, step out of the toy department and into the real world. And I'll always be on the lookout for special guests. By all means, join us.
Hi, I'm Stephen Cuevas, and you're listening to Producing While Asian.
So, in your time so far in your career, how do you have any kind of top memorable moments that you feel like, wow, like I'm doing what I love and I got to do this, like something that I've been really like either something you've been dreaming of or something you didn't expect that happened and you're like, oh wow, like that just happened, And so tell us maybe like a couple of those in your career that really stand out for you, because I know a lot of listeners love hearing that from our guests.
Yes. So my first one, I had done the tour of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and I played keyboards on that. And the next year, they were setting up to do a cast recording of it, and they had asked the entire Broadway orchestra if they wanted to do it. And for some reason, the keyboard player said no. And so they called me up, and I got to perform on the cast recording of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So, I mean, that is a dream come true to be on a cast album. So I did get to do that. I mean, that's magical. Another time is actually through Broadway Barcada, which I'm sure you've talked about on this show. You've talked to Billy and Brian and Liz. They approached me. They wanted me to music direct a concert of songs by Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty, who are some of my favorite songwriters in theater. And of course I said yes. And through the process, I was able to meet Stephen Flaherty, and the 5 of us had dinner with him or drinks with him. We got to have a very casual chat with him, and he was just so generous and such a lovely person. It's one of those moments where like you meet your heroes and they're everything that you want them to be. And he came to our concert and loved it and was so supportive. I mean, that was definitely a moment where I was like, wow, I'm performing music by one of my heroes and he's in the audience and he's loving it and he's loving me. And that was such a magical moment. Yeah. And that actually led to so many other opportunities. I got to do Anastasia and Once on This Island on Broadway. I got to be on the cast recording of Once on This Island, another dream come true. Lea Salonga's on that cast recording, and she was in the Broadway show. And then eventually I got to do other shows with them. I got to MD the tour of Once on This Island as well. So that was kind of a catalyst for me doing many shows of theirs. So that was truly, truly like I'm in the right place at the right time and with the right people. And I'm so glad it was like through Broadway Barcada as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. And it's interesting is Billy and Brian and Liz also mentioned that same concert on their interview as well. So it just continues to prove that was a monumental moment for Broadway Barcada. For the listeners that haven't listened to that episode, there's an episode about the organization called Broadway Barcada, and it's a collective of Filipino artists, not necessarily on Broadway, it's just people who are performers. It started with Broadway stars, and Stephen is their music director almost all of the time, and it's great. And so that's how Stephen ended up here on the show. So now, are there people that you still, I mean, obviously we do, but in this moment, are there folks that are on your like wish list or shows that are on your wish list that you're like, this is what I have my eyes set on for the future? Like, I'd like to do this or work with this group or this person, in the future.
Yeah, there's so many people I'd love to work with, and I don't even know who. I love working with people who are good and nice to work with and who will inspire me. So I don't even know. They're out there. But I will let you know, I put this out into the universe because they are 2 shows that I feel like everyone has done, but I have not yet. And I laugh because they're kind of guilty pleasure shows of mine.
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah. But I do have strong connections to both of them. So the first one is Beauty and the Beast. I know it might sound weird, but that is...
No, not weird.
It is one of my top favorite movies, and it is the first show I ever saw on Broadway when I was 10, and it changed my life. I mean, I didn't think that something like Broadway was attainable until I stepped into that theater, and it was just such a magical production. Again, I feel like everyone has done it at this point, but I haven't. So
I haven't either, so it's fine.
Putting it out there into the universe. The other one I also laugh because it's a guilty pleasure of mine is Mamma Mia. I think it's just so much fun. I was a big ABBA fan even before the musical came out, and again, I feel like everyone's done it at this point, but I haven't. So whenever that next production is, someone call me up. I'm ready.
Yeah. Have you listened to their new music yet? I have not. But
Oh,
have you heard the
of course
new
I
album?
have. Yes, I have. I have it on vinyl.
Nice.
I have the t-shirt. Oh yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
the show there, this podcast, we are focusing on our community, and obviously this podcast came out of the necessity to talk about those in our industry, in our community, because we experienced some pretty awful things in the last couple of years because of this pandemic we're going through. And so I do like to touch a little bit upon like challenges in your career, or just living in New York. Like, what kind of challenges have you kind of come across that you're hoping to bring light to, that will hopefully change for people that come after us, in whatever sense that means to you, whether it's in jobs or just in life. And how does that kind of touch upon what you do every day?
I feel like a lot of people don't really know the music side of the theater world. And a lot of it comes, you get a lot of jobs by people just recommending you and asking you to either sub on a show or outright hiring you for something. And that, as you can imagine, is hard for musicians of color, because we're not usually the first people that in a majority white field thinks about. So there are certainly challenges in my field and things we need to overcome about diversifying what the pits look like, what the music directors look like. And this is across the board. This is even female identifying players and music directors, conductors. In a way, we who are not in the majority have to perform even that much better when we're asked to do jobs, because they can very easily say, oh, that person wasn't good, so I don't want to hire them for the next job. Whereas I feel like a lot of white musicians, and especially the up and coming white male musicians, kind of get a pass if they don't do as well. The way it works in Broadway orchestras is that people are hired to play the show full time, and then those players are allowed to pick their substitute musicians. And in a lot of cases, and especially when you have a mostly white and male orchestra, they're going to ask that kind of person to also sub for them in a show. So I've felt, whenever I've observed shows in pit orchestras or subbed in pit orchestras, I get a sense of, oh, what is he doing here? How did he get involved? Who did he know that got him into this pit to watch or to play? And then there's always like an ear out. Oh, is he playing well? I always get that sense, even if it doesn't exist and it's not like outright said. I always get that sense. And then on the opposite side of things, for music directors, we see shows that are always, there's certain shows that tell, say, Black stories or Latinx stories. They always go to, whether it's right or not, they always ask Black conductors, Latinx MDs. And great, those people should be telling those stories. They never do those with Asian musicals. Why is that?
Right.
You never see Asian conductors conduct or music direct Asian shows. So I have never music directed an Asian show. I've never done Miss Saigon. I've never done The King and I've never done Pacific. I've never Here Lies Love. I've never done any of those shows. Those shows were all music directed and conducted by white people. So I wonder where or why it gets lost in translation when you hire an all Asian cast, but then it doesn't go to any other department. Right. So that's where I am at the moment. And so Beauty and the Beast, Mamma Mia, an Asian show. I want to do an Asian show.
Of course. And, it's interesting that issue, it's pervasive because it's on the creative side of these shows, the production side of these shows. Like that's, I feel like a lot of other issues that come up, and we can even talk about like casting issues, even though people are a little more conscious nowadays. But, that comes up because the creative side is not filled with at least a majority people that are part of that culture, so that's why I exist in what I do, because I'm like, if I don't, fight to get to that table, Scarlett Johansson's going to play another Asian superhero, like if I don't speak up, no one's going to say something about it, because it's going to go through all those levels of approval without anybody noticing, because they don't realize that it's a problem. And so, that's interesting to hear you say. There was somebody that I was talking to recently and it was an actor, and she said that she has never been reviewed by an Asian critic. She's been, she's done Asian work, she plays Asian characters, but all of her critics have always been either a white man, a white straight man, or a white gay man, or just somebody who's white. It's never been an Asian person critiquing her work. And so I thought that was interesting too, because it's like, it goes beyond the on stage and backstage. It goes outside of the theater too. Like if you're doing a show about, we can talk about Miss Saigon, a show about Vietnam, and I'm sure it's already happened, but like you'd want to hear from somebody who's Vietnamese, about what they're seeing, or somebody who was living in that time, maybe they, getting their opinion. But, it's that extra effort. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the music industry, we do have a lot of our AAPI brothers and sisters that play instruments very well. And, to not find an AAPI Asian music director for an Asian show, I feel is a little bit of a far-fetched thing, because it's like, how could you not? How could you not? They exist. It's like when people are casting Aladdin and they're like, I can't find a person who's of, that ethnicity. And you're like, are you kidding me? Do you feel like that? Do you share that same view as well? Like, almost like it's not impossible.
Oh, it is not impossible. I mean, I have Asian music director friends and colleagues who I applaud everything they do. I support all of their work, and we all support each other. And even all of my other music director friends and colleagues of color, we are all very supportive of each other. We never feel like we're taking anyone's jobs. We just want each other to succeed, because their success is our success. So yes, they're out there. And also, we need to help create the points of access for people who are up and coming and want to do these jobs and fill these roles, because then there's no excuse to be like, we didn't find anyone. Well, actually, there is this entire pipeline of people who can do it and are ready to go. So they're out there.
Right. Like they exist. Like try a little harder, I guess.
Hey, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. I created this podcast to have hard conversations. Conversations that make us human but are also wildly uncomfortable. Conversations that help give voice to the voiceless and to the marginalized. Now you can listen to the entire first season on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Consider this your personal invitation to join the conversation.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast.
Hi, I'm Stephen Cuevas, and you're listening to Producing While Asian.
So now, touching back on Broadway Barcada, because that's kind of our meeting point. And with my own organization, I feel like we also are in the field of creating our own opportunities as well. I feel like people of color, whether you're Asian or not, it also behooves us to create work, to create opportunities, kind of what you were just saying. In this moment, you are kind of touching on the producer side a little bit sometimes. So here comes the question, on a scale of 1 to producer being like, absolutely, it's what I do. I love it. That's me, in addition to what I do. Or 1, which is like, not at all. Like I talk to producers, but I don't really identify in that field. or a 5, which is I do both. Where do you sit on that scale of like 1 to 10, and why? It's always awesome to hear the answers to this question. So I'm looking forward to what your thoughts are.
Yes. So, I would have had a very different answer pre-pandemic, but because of the pandemic, I think I am inching closer every day to the producer end of things. First of all, throughout the pandemic, I've had to produce my own music, or any music that I have created over the last 2 years virtually. I've had to kind of oversee that and in a sense be a music producer. I've had to also just wear so many more hats than I've ever worn over the last 2 years, whether it's, directing or running rehearsals or gathering the people, finding the people, maybe even fundraising. So, I mean, I've done a little of what is involved in producing over the past couple years. And you know what? I don't think I see that stopping anytime soon now, especially because there's no way to go back, There's no way to go back to the way things were when they were not optimal. So whenever I have the opportunity to have a word in like who gets hired and how we go about things, I'm going to have my say, and I'm going to let them know when it's not right, or hire appropriately to whatever show I'm doing. This is a show centering Black trans people. Okay, can we find Black trans musicians? Like, that's how I'm going to approach everything now, because everyone's story should be told, and authentically so. So I'm inching every day to that producer end of things while still doing everything I'm doing.
Of course. And I feel like it takes a producer is different in every part of our industry. It's really nice to hear from a music producer's point of view this time, but the one through line that connects all of us in the different parts is organization. You kind of become the like den mom, so to speak, to make sure everything is good, like everyone's on the same page. And like you're saying, finding people and bringing people together, I feel like that's also the best part of that skill, is that you're creating community every time. You're creating a new community every time. And so and building that pipeline you mentioned, which is just so important, especially in whatever the aftermath of this changeover that's happening is in our field. So it's really good and awesome to hear what you're doing in that sense, because I feel like we're all coming at it in different ways. Is there anything in your opinion now, in addition to what you've said, that you'd like to see more of, or that you'd like to see never come back again in the reboot of our theater world? And you can just do the what you'd like to see more of. Don't have to talk about eliminating what things, but even though there are things that we can be like, we're good with that. But is there any part of the culture that you really want to encourage more of in this new time, or anything that you were like, oh well, that happened before, but we don't need to see that anymore?
Yes, I want to see every creative, design, producing, etc. team be diverse and inclusive always. I want to see at least one female in every one of those teams. And I think there are many practices that we've grown accustomed to that we can reconsider doing things a different way. For example, the 10 out of 12s. For those who don't know, 10 out of 12s are long tech days where the actors are called for 10 hours out of 12 hours in that day. But as I am not an actor, I am called for longer than 10 to 12 hours a day. And then we have crew and designer and other creatives who are called for much longer than 12 hours in that day and are expected to work actively for those 12 plus hours. So I just got done with a run of a show where we didn't do 10 out of 12s, we did 8 out of 10s, which were still exhausting. But I mean, it was so much better and much more productive. So there are practices that we do in theater. I don't even know why we do them. I think we can reconsider some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what a lot of people also don't hear about that aren't in the room or in the industry are that these things, these 10 out of 12s, 8 out of 10s, all these stuff, this is not an hourly pay type situation, especially for our actors. You know, like they're not earning X amount of dollars per hour plus overtime. Like that's not how this works. It's like you have a stipend and that's your stipend, and then you get paid per show. So like if you're there for 10 out of 12, you're there for 10 out of 12 because you signed a contract, not because this producer's like, I'm paying you $50 an hour to be here, you know, for at least for the actor side. You know, I'm not sure how things work on the other side, but it's probably very similar. Like, you know, you get paid X amount of dollars and that's it. There's like overtime, quote unquote, does not, that's not a thing. That's not what we have. So
and it certainly doesn't cover production meetings that happen after hours, which sometimes go on for so long. Oh yeah. I mean, even for projects as small as a reading, I remember I was producing a reading in New York in 2018, and so rehearsal would be done by like 10 p.m. Then I was staying in New York for that reading, so I would commute back to where I was staying, which was like probably half an hour or so. I get back and finally like calm at like 11-ish. And then I'd start working on like production stuff for the next day and also be on the phone with people. And I'd blink my eyes, it'd be 2 a.m. And I'm like, okay, well now I need to go to sleep and maybe, you know, and get up the next day and keep working. So yeah, I agree with you. I would love to see all of that change a little bit in the new world that we're in right now. So tell us a little bit about what's happening with you today. Like, what projects are you involved with? Is there anything that you can talk about that is public information? Because I know we have a lot of things that our guests are working on but cannot disclose. Where are you at nowadays? What are you doing? I just finished a run of a show at the American Repertory Theater, which was wonderful. And it was my first time professionally working in Boston since I've graduated college. I went to school in Boston, so it was a bit of a homecoming for me. So it was lovely to spend the fall in Cambridge. So I just got back from that, and I am working on some things and training on a few things. Probably by the time this airs, maybe something will be announced, but I have to keep things close to my chest because I also don't want to say anything before they happen.
Well, this is kind of our Thanksgiving episode, so if you don't expect anything by then, if you don't expect anything by the time this is airing when people are listening right now, just to be safe. But we'll tell people to watch our social media. We'll retweet some stuff that you might put out there or repost some things. So, so how can our listener base find you? How can they, you know, if they're like, I really like this guy, I want to hire him, or, you know, just get in touch with you to, you know, just talk more with you about stuff that you've mentioned on the podcast? Where can they do that?
Absolutely. You can find me on social media at Stephen M. Cuevas. That is Stephen with a V, M as in Michael, and my last name is Cuevas. Stephen M. Cuevas. So there's a funny story about my handle, actually. I don't use my middle initial for professional work, but there are other Stephen Cuevases in the world who already took that handle.
Rude.
So rude.
I hate when that happens, when you're like, oh, wow, like, okay, well.
So I have like a Google alert out for my name to see like what these other Stephen Cuevases are doing. And, you know, there's one entertainment journalist, there's like one police officer. I get everything. And then the rare occasion when it's actually me, I'm like, ooh, I'm doing something.
There should be a world in which you collaborate with the other Stevens. And, you know, I don't know in what way that would be, but that entertainment writer, wherever you are, Steven Cuevas, the entertainment writer, if you're listening, you know, we want you. Come and
absolutely.
That's really funny. But yeah, social media is so weird. It's just this world of things that are real sometimes, but mostly not real. But you know, it's a great way to connect with folks. And
so all of that
on the last kind of question for the hour, and this is a very interviewee type question, but I feel like it's worth it because it matters, you know. So
great.
What pieces, I always say pieces, like plural, because like when you pressure someone into one thing, it's like, oh God, I don't know what to say. But like, you know, what pieces of advice would you have for somebody who's, you know, whether they're in college or in high school even, or even just young and trying this for the first time, or not young? They could be like, you know, a full-ass grown-up and be like, I want to be a music director. You know, what are your pieces of advice for anyone that's listening, that's considering, or is in it, but, you know, feels stuck or something like that? You know?
Yeah. First, before I go into all of that, there are so many people who come up to me and say, oh, you know, I studied piano and I wish I'd continued with it, or I've always wanted to play the piano. And my answer to that is, then just do it. Just play the piano. Yeah. It's okay. You don't have to be a virtuoso. It's also one of those instruments that you can just sit and play the chords and accompany yourself. Like, it's such a versatile instrument. So whatever skill level you're at in the piano, just do it and continue doing it if you like to do it. So that's what I say to that, because that comes up all the time with me. I don't know why. But probably because, like us, everyone is sat on a piano bench and forced to have lessons when they're young. But yes, continue to play. I think that especially people who go into the music side of theater, I say see and recognize what you're good at, because we all have our strengths as musicians. Musical theater covers so many different genres of music that there's probably something you're really right for. So I think recognize what you're good at. And if there's something that you're not comfortable with and you feel like you're going to be called upon to do that, I think look into that too and see how you can approach those things that you're not necessarily the best at, and see how you can improve it to a level where you can comfortably perform it. There are so many styles of music that I don't profess to be an expert in, but I've been hired to do them. And, you know, you just have to have that confidence and that game face and you just do it. And you know, I've heard so many comments like, oh, you were really playing it tonight. And I'm like, really? I felt like a fraud, but okay. So yes, you know. I tell people all the time that so much of it is about conviction and confidence. So I like to tell this story because it actually did happen to me. So when I was in high school, I auditioned. I was playing the violin, but it wasn't my main instrument. It's not what I was focusing on. But I did an audition for all-state adjudications. And I didn't really practice that much. I was playing some Mozart concerto, and I knew it wasn't perfect, but I went in that day and I played with much conviction, and I got a 98 out of 100. And I saw the comments afterwards, and it said, it sounded like you were having an off day, but I know you know how to play the instrument, or something like that. So that's why she graded me very high. So I think that just goes to show, if you go in knowing your musicianship, knowing that you play with, you know, such vig and vimmer, I think that counts for a lot, actually. And that's what a lot of people, that's what they respond to in a lot of their favorite performers, even if they're not pitch perfect or they don't play a note perfect show. You're looking to really get grabbed by that performer.
Right.
So yes, I tell a lot of people, singers, actors, musicians, like just go for it. And then also I say to people who want to be a music director, I say, open your mind up. Open your mind up, because it's not just about the music. It is about almost everything that isn't the music. it is about the actors who are actually singing the words and producing the sound. It is about the movement that they're doing that was given to them by the choreographer. It's about the concept that the director has. It is about the design of the show, how it looks, how it sounds, and it's about the audience and how they're going to respond to you. It's about the musicians that you have, who all bring their own voices into the playing of the show. So it really is about so many other things than just getting the music right. It's really about the collaboration and the storytelling of it. So if you want to approach it that way, how does the music function in a show? Why is music happening in the show? Why do the orchestrations flow the way they do? Why does it happen in this moment with this scene change, and when the light hits a certain way, and when they're wearing this certain costume, and how it sounds in the house? Just all of that. That's to me what music direction is about. It's rarely just about the music to me. That's what I say to prospective music directors. Just open up your mind, open up your world to everything around you, and see how you fit in that.
That's awesome. It's because the music is the jumping off point, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just your way in the door. Like
right.
After that, there's so much more. And so, but that's great. So it's been really great chatting with you. And, if there's ever anything in the future that you want to come back on the show and talk about, or, people that you want to talk to on the show, because I know we're going to move into small group conversations in season 2.
Oh, yes.
Please, I would love to have you back. It'd be awesome. So really good luck with everything. And I'm so thankful you could come on the show. And I look forward to seeing you soon, and then hopefully working with you at some point again.
Oh, absolutely.
And,
again and again.
We'll get together.
All of the above. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Producing While Asian podcast. Our theme song was created by Luckstock. We are produced by Press Play Podcast, and the show is edited by Michael Santos Sandoval. If you have a moment, please leave a review and a rating, and be sure to send us any topic ideas you have to producingwhileasian@gmail.com. To follow us, stay updated, and read our blog, visit www.producingwhileasian.com. We hope you join us again soon.